Good afternoon. I have the lovely Tony with me. Hello, Tony. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Donna. Thank you very much for having me. So I'm Tony Falder. I'm a crime and thriller writer. I've done a couple of standalone books. I've got three series on the go, and I'm best known for D.I. Jimmy Bliss books. There are 10 of those plus a novella, and the plans are to have several more. Very happy to say.
And me, and all the other Blissettes.
Uh,
But we are here to talk about book two in your other series.
yeah. Right. So the Predators. There's a not for
Ooh,
sale copy there.
organised. I like it. That's not
Yeah,
like
well,
you.
I've got well, yeah, I'm not organised because these shouldn't be here. These should be in the post to two people who won them, but they're still sitting on my desk. And there's the lovely bookmark, very stylish. They'll be getting one of those as well. So yeah, they shouldn't be here. They should be in the post, but they're not. So I'm not organised at all. So the Predators. Um, yeah, we returned to Royston Chase and Claire Laney. Bit of a surprise and a bit late. Bit of a surprise because I wasn't at all certain when I did The Huntsman that it was going to make a series. I didn't know how well it would do. All I really knew was that I wanted to write a story because today I think it's one of my favorite storylines. Um, but it couldn't be a Bliss book. It was definitely a new character's time. Um, and I don't think you can really tell when you're writing them whether you've got them right or not. But the response was fantastic. And yeah, really, the second book should have come out last year, but I started writing it and I couldn't really wrap my head around the voices, the different characters, because I was still in Bliss and Chandler mode. So I carried on instead and wrote The Lightning Rod. Um, and then I turned my attentions back to this one. And by then, it was just about the right time to come into it. So, The Predators is essentially about the discovery of a frozen body on the Downs in Wiltshire. And there's not a great deal for the team to go on in terms of forensics or anything like that because the body is frozen. But bit by bit, they start piecing together the fact that she was murdered. And then they get a break in the case when somebody shows them a photo of her. They think on the night she was murdered, but she's with a bunch of other hikers and they start focusing on those other hikers and suddenly those other hikers or some of them at least start to go missing. And so it's about the hunt for both, really. It's about the hunt for the killer of this young girl, but it's also about the hunt for these people who are going missing because nobody quite knows whether they're witnesses or whether they're victims themselves now, or whether one of them or more of them happen to be the killer. So essentially, that's what the book is about. I enjoyed getting back into Chase and Laney. I liked exploring them a little bit more character background, especially for Chase. And it's nice to write a different kind of lead character who's got a different kind of home life. In that he's happily married with his little kid. And that's a real major bonus for him when he goes home every night, in that he's got his family. And it helps me as well differentiate between him and Jimmy Bliss. The book is actually, due to the way Amazon work, the book is already out in paperback and hardback. It's just the way Amazon work, I'm afraid. You can't schedule a day when it's released. You just have to submit it and hope for the best. The the last time I did it, it took 5 days, which is why I submitted it the other day, yesterday morning. and they did it in less than a day. So they're already out. But the ebook and Kindle Unlimited will all have access to it on Monday. So, yeah, looking forward to it. Anxious, nervous as usual, but the early reviews have been really good. And hopefully, I'll see at least fans of the first book coming along with it. If not, not all Jimmy Bliss fans went over to that book or haven't done so yet. So I'm hoping it'll be a bump for the first book as well.
And when you first started speaking, you said that the story wasn't a Bliss story. So how do you decide? Why did you think that Bliss can't do that? Why did you think, okay, I need new characters for this story?
Well, the premise for the story was actually meant to be for Sidney Mallow from 15 Coffins. So, because when I was writing that book, I was trying to think of a follow-up, and I thought of the premise of this frozen body being discovered on a hiking trail, and how that might have come about, how she might have ended up murdered. When I decided I wasn't going to be writing another one, I don't know if ever, but certainly not then, I still had the storyline in my head and written down in my book of sort of ideas, and I kept coming back to it and thinking, I want to write this. So, naturally, my first thought is always Jimmy Bliss. But the more I was thinking about, well, I mean, that was obviously the same for the Huntsman. But this book and this story just felt right for those two characters, the two new characters, rather than Bliss and Chandler, because obviously with my Bliss books, I tend to have at least a couple of threads running through the story, if not more, and then try to tie them all together. And often they're different cases, or Jimmy Bliss might be working off books or something like that. Whereas, the Huntsman focused on a single story, and I wanted this one to be a single story. I didn't want there to be any other distractions. And so it felt more like a Chase and Laney book than a Bliss and Chandler book to me. And it was when I was looking for an idea for the follow-up, it was the first one that came to mind. And I thought, yeah, that really suits them more than it suits Bliss and Chandler. It really did. And also the environment. So the landscape there and the area, it lended itself more to Wiltshire than it did Peterborough. Because, the only hill they've got is, a speed bump in Peterborough. So, yeah, so oh, I've lost the lid now. Never mind. I'll find it one day. Yeah, so it just that's there was no sort of great deep thinking about it. It just felt right in my head that it was the area and the characters suited that storyline more.
And in this one, you've taken them out of their little sort of solo station and put them into a bigger group. Was that hard to create all those new characters as well?
Well, yeah, because you always wonder, are you creating too many characters? But the fact was that the fact that they're in sharing stations, because they're still in the old one, but they now go over to Gable Cross in Swindon a lot more. But the reason really was a follow-up to the first book, because after the events of the first book, I mean, if you, without getting too deep and giving away spoilers about the Huntsman, there's a reason that they have a police presence in the village, this tiny little rural village. And that reason pretty much disappeared in the book one. So there was a deliberation in my head of would it even remain open at all now? So they're kind of paying lip service to keeping it open for the sake of the local village and the local community there. But a lot of the work takes place at Gable Cross. And I felt that it was probably disingenuous not to do that, to try and keep them there all the time. But then, yeah, it did open up the fact because Chase is a DS, and because in the Huntsman, the senior officers were trying to keep things down. They were trying to keep things out of the media. They didn't want it, to be a mass thing. So that's why he was allowed to run that case. Whereas this one, it's a stand. Once they realised it was a murder, it was definitely going to be run by at least a DCI. So, it was a case of having to. But then, yeah, introducing a whole new team, it's still mostly Chase and Laney. But obviously, I did have to introduce a whole new range of characters. And yeah, again, when you sort of kind of look at it and you think the jobs that there are to do on an investigation, it's a matter of keeping them down as much as possible. So yeah, that's what I tried to do. Try to split it up a little bit, give a little bit of room to the new characters, because we may meet them again in the future. We may not. So I just kind of opened up a few doors, and I can keep them open or not. But the main focus is still on Chase and Laney sort of doing what they do best.
It creates some great interactions as well. So, especially with the boss, I like some of the conversations with Chase and the boss there, and she's very cool as well. Which is nice, instead of having a dragon and being scared of. They're actually very reasonable. So I like that.
Well, I wanted, I wanted to create a team that all worked together well, and there were no dissenters, at least on the page. I mean, whether some of them become dissenters or not in the future, who knows? But kind of a little bit of treating each other with a little bit of mild suspicion at first, but then getting on with the job, which is by and large what teams do. So yeah, I mean, I'm not against having agitators in teams, as you know, but I'm also not against having teams that work together well, fluidly. And yeah, they all have a wary eye upstairs, because I mean, everybody hates their boss, don't they? No matter who they are. And even if they're good people, everybody still hates them. So there's a little bit of that, but yeah, they work, they function. I thought they functioned well together as a unit thrust together,
And something else that I like about your books, you do it with Bliss actually, and you definitely do it now, is showing the bringing up of sort of trainees and stuff. You've always done it, watching people grow, and then you've obviously done it with Alison, which is really cool as well, because obviously new people do come in and learn and stuff, and I love the fact that you show that.
Well, I mean, obviously in the first book she's a PCSO, but she's a PCSO who kind of wants to be more. She's got she's got the qualifications to do so, but she's I make it quite clear, and she's involved partially in the first investigation, not hugely, but they kind of Chase especially, but Laney as well, kind of give her a little bit of work to do, just sort of test her out. And I felt, well, there's a passing of time between then and now, not much, but I know that these sort of trainee detective posts are now part and parcel of detective work. I know they have them in Peterborough, and I know that they do have them in Swindon in Wiltshire. So yeah, she's a trainee detective. She's gone in as a detective. She hasn't had to be in uniform at all, other than as a PCSO. And yeah, she's undergoing training on the job at this stage. But I do mention the other things that she's had to do as part of the framework to allow her to become a detective. And I do like seeing that, I do, excuse me, people get promoted along the lines, if they want it. I'm at pains in the Bliss series to point out the reasons some people don't want to be promoted. Whereas this one, Alison clearly wanted to be a detective. So, there at some point she will become just a DC rather than a TDC.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was the time either, TDC. When I kept reading it, I'm like, oh,
Well,
yeah.
it seems to me that areas have different words, different vocabulary for most things, and they call them different things. There are different schemes to get them on board. I've chosen to use that one because I know it's used. Whether it's widely used or not, I don't know. But I know it is used in certain places. So I felt it was as good a description as any. Plus, it's, when people are talking DCIs and DCSs and all that kind of stuff, TDC just seemed to quite fit.
But yeah. You've said you've written 10 Bliss now and a novella. So is there any anything you've taken from writing that many books into writing a new series? Any pitfalls you know to avoid, or any sort of
Yeah,
things that
do it
work?
better. Do it better.
Bliss is awesome. You can't do it much better than that.
Well, yeah, but what I still think I've always said is that Bliss, it took 3 books really for me to get going. Because I think it takes you a while to establish characters, to establish their background, and for people to sort of become familiar with them, but not overly familiar. So, I still, I'm hoping that if there's a 3rd book in the series, that it will be the best of them. But it's like, as I said, I particularly enjoyed the storyline of the 1st book. And it's, for me, the biggest fear wasn't so much going into that 1st book, it was this follow-up book, because it went over so well, because it did well in terms of reviews and sales. I thought, well, now I've got to live up to that. Whereas, I always felt that from the 1st Bliss book that I could improve upon and improve upon and improve upon. If I'd written The Autumn Tree first, which is still my favorite Bliss book, I'm not sure I'd have had the willpower to write a book 2, because I still think, that's probably the best all-round book I've written. I know other people have liked the 2 since, but for me, that's still my favorite. So having written The Huntsman, I thought, well, can I get anywhere near as close? Can I get close to that in turn? And I knew it had to be something very different. I didn't want to do a similar storyline at all. I wanted to keep well away from that. So it means it's not quite as visceral, it's not quite as emotional, but it is to the people involved, which is often the case. And hopefully the readers buy into the emotional side in terms of the victim's family, especially her parents, and also the other people who get involved in it, and how they come to be involved in it. So that it's not as visceral, because there's no spoiler to say that the 1st one involves child abuse, and you can't get much more visceral than that. But yeah, it's still a grim subject matter. So I felt that this one was okay to write. But going into it, what lessons did I take? It's hard because I don't really want to take many lessons. I want to escape Jimmy Bliss when I'm writing these books. So I deliberately write it differently. In fact, a few of my readers have said how markedly different they are, and they wouldn't necessarily known I'd written them unless my name was on it. But that's completely deliberate, because I had to write them differently. As I say, I wanted a single continuous thread to focus on, and I wanted the characters to be completely different, except for the basic the substance of the characters is that they want justice, and they're determined to catch the bad guys. That should be at the root of all detectives. So you know, there's no getting away from that. He and Jimmy Bliss share that, but hopefully the rest of their character is entirely different.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. As you know, I love all your books anyway, so
Well,
probably not a fair judge.
I don't know that people enjoy these ones as much as they enjoy Bliss, but I don't know how many people have given them a chance yet.
I would argue that the reviews say that they do.
Yeah, I mean, most people, yeah, a lot of people do. A lot of people who are vocal, who I know about Jimmy Bliss, but you know, there's a lot of Bliss readers I never get to hear from. And I don't know how many of them went across to Chase, how many of them liked it. On the other hand, it's worked the other way, because there's a lot of people who read The Huntsman, and that was their first book of mine, and they've gone on to read the Bliss series. So it, you know, it works in a different way, and it's nice to have that other series to sort of fall back on, because I kind of like to write something different after, you know, I had 2 books of Bliss and then something different. But that depends on how often I'm writing.
And you've had a couple of standalones in the middle, so you're still trying to carry on with Bliss. Then you've got this new series. So are there any more plans for standalones?
I don't plan standalones. It just, if the story comes to me and I feel it's a one-off that I don't really want to include in a series, then I would write it, as I did with 15 Coffins. You know, that had to be something completely new, and it was completely new. And yeah, it was. I set off writing that as a standalone. Partway through, I decided it might be nice to extend it and have a series. But then I sort of went the other way again and wrote it as a standalone. That's not to say I'll never revisit the character, and a lot of people wish I would. But there just isn't enough time. You know, I have my Mike Lynch series as well, and I've only got 2 books of that. You know, difficult to call it a series when there's only 2. But I do want to write a third. I've got a third in mind, and I've written some of it. But you know, in all honesty, not only do I mean, I loved writing those books, but they don't sell well. You know, and you know, 6 months, spending 6 months on writing that third book, you know, to lose out financially potentially is not really what I'm looking for. Or you know, but it's not. I don't mean losing out in terms, because my book make their money back. But while I'm writing that, I'm not writing something else. So that's 6 months I could be writing the next Jimmy Bliss, you know. And the way that series is panning out in my head, you know, I've got the next year doing that. So there'll be no time for anything else. Yeah. If it all goes to plan.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you something, then I've completely forgotten. Oh, you've crossed over characters from the Mike Lynch book into your last one. So are you planning on doing that, especially between Bliss and Chase and Laney? Would you ever do crossovers with them? Because I think that could be quite fun, especially if Bliss met Laney.
Well, no, the crossover was from Degrees of Darkness.
That's it. Yeah, I couldn't remember off the top of my head.
Frank Rogers crossed
Yes.
over from that book into. I loved doing that. In fact, the moment I knew what I wanted out of this external character coming in, because I'd had people from the National Crime Agency in it before, but I so desperately wanted to kind of update Frank Rogers' history. And I have no intentions of writing a follow-up to Degrees of Darkness. And I just thought I want to use him, and I knew how I could use him. And once I decided, my only query was he a bit too much like Jimmy? Because in my head, I took some of the aspects of Frank Rogers and brought them into Jimmy Bliss. But hopefully they're not too similar, but they have very similar minds, as it were. Franco's a bit more psychological. As for bringing in other characters from crossovers, yeah. I mean, I know some people. I mean, Michael Connolly, one of my favorite authors, has had characters from 3 different series cross over into one book at one point, and that takes some doing. So yeah, I'd like to, but only if it's feasible. You know, I don't want to shoehorn them in. You know, it's got to make sense. You know, there's people have said to me, "Oh, it'd be nice to see that character again, this character again," and I just think, well, yeah, but it's got to make sense. You know, people liked, you know, a few of my characters from early on in the Bliss books, and they sort of said, well, you know, I had an MI5 character called Monday, and you know, people said, "Oh, I'd like to see him again," and you know, I've thought of a scenario for one of my future books where he could potentially turn up. But as I say, it's something I don't want to shoehorn and people go, "Oh, that's a bit cheesy." You know, so yeah, but I've got nothing against it. And there are characters, you know, I'd love to see Mike and Terry from the Lynch books turn up in one of the books. Yeah. So, so again, like bringing back Sydney, I won't say never.
You had the power, to be fair.
I do, but I don't have the time.
Were you not just taking a piss out of me, something chronic, before we started about how you're retired and you don't work anymore?
Yeah, but yeah, unfortunately, yeah, life has a habit of stepping in to sort of tear down your best laid plans, doesn't it? And as I told you earlier, you know, I'm taking an extended break from writing at the moment. It's enforced, and I've not. Well, as I also mentioned earlier, this is the first time I've been in this office for a month now. Somehow, in not writing, I've managed to write 4 new chapters of the Bliss book, and I really don't know how that happened. Sometimes when I'm sitting there, you know, late at night, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm fed up skimming through YouTube. I'll just do a little bit. I'll just write a few paragraphs, you know, and somehow that turns into chapters. So I'm doing it. But yeah, I have plans for Jimmy Bliss, which I'll talk about later. But I don't know when they're going to come to fruition because, as I say, I'm not working at the moment, and I don't know when I will be, quite frankly. So you know, it's just sort of a few personal issues that have got in the way, like life does, and yeah, I'm taking a bit of a back seat, so I'm not in the saddle at the moment. But when I do get cracking, yeah, it'll be. I've got the next 2 Jimmy Bliss books planned and ready to go.
Good stuff. I mean, you know that I'll nag you. You know, you know not to dare me now, right?
Yeah,
Because I will do.
Yeah, yeah,
I still had the notifications on my phone actually from 2 days ago. I don't know if you'll be able to see, but it still says remind AJ is awesome.
Oh, yeah. At least you don't do that anymore.
I still could. It's still there. It still comes up.
Yeah, well,
start again.
Cancel it as one of your notifications. It was only supposed to be a joke.
Don't joke with me. I will take it seriously because it amused me, and it amused me that but you were just like, oh, for God's sake.
You should replace that now with remind AJ he's alive.
I thought waking up every morning in pain was a reminder that you're alive. So I've heard, apparently, from other people.
Yeah, there's always things that do keep you reminded that you're alive, that's for sure.
I'm sure your darling daughter does that quite frequently as well.
Yeah, I try and avoid her as much as possible.
You moved halfway down the country to be closer to her.
Yeah, well, that was just to keep my wife quiet.
Under the thumb, poor man with 2 strong females, bless you.
It was. I never even saw the house before I moved into it. Only in pictures.
Well, who's the idiot then, really?
Yeah, me.
What can I say? And that leads me nicely to my next question. You set bliss in Peterborough, then you moved to Wiltshire, but now you've moved down near the south coast. So are you going to move any of your books to where you actually live? Or are you happy setting
Well,
them where you
I'd
don't
have
live
to.
anymore?
I'd have to start a new series. And as we've already discussed, there ain't enough time in the world to start a new series, even though I've actually thought of one. And I've even drafted out 4 of the characters. Yeah, I mean, there's always, yeah, Peterborough was because I lived there, obviously. So that was a nice one and easy to research, and easy to think of places and easier to get right. But it's still easy to get right because I still know Peterborough very well. So, that's not so bad. And in most Bliss books, they sort of go to other places as well. But yeah, I know Peterborough well enough to still carry on writing about it. So that's not a problem. I know Wiltshire fairly well, and I visit there sort of a couple of times a year when I can. So I know that area very well. And down here, yeah, there is a temptation to start writing something, but as I say, it would be new and it wouldn't be yet because, as I say, I need to get these next 2 Bliss books out of my system before I even think about something else. And that's a year away, so that gives me that year to think about other things. But it's really not a problem. I mean, I set virtually a whole book in New Mexico, so you don't have to live there.
If you did do that, would you consider doing a different genre or going sort of more cozy?
Yeah, no, I don't. Nothing against cozy, but I don't see myself writing something like that. I know it's in vogue at the moment, and if I did a cozy book and included a dog, I'd probably well happy. But I've got my dog in Bliss book now, so dear old Max. So it's the idea that I've got is not new at all. It's been done many a time. But I quite fancy doing something along the lines of PIs. What spurred me on was I was rewatched for about 100th time an old TV series called Vincent, and that features Ray Winston as a private eye. And I really kind of like that whole idea of an ex-cop doing that job, and feeling the frustration of no longer being able to do exactly what he did, but still investigate things and still get his kicks that way, and I thought, if I'm going to do something locally, I don't want to do another procedural. I don't want to do, kind of a serial killer thing. I want to do something a little bit more sedate, but still with, crime investigations at the heart. So that leads you naturally to private investigators, working not murders essentially, but things that might turn out to be murders or might have murder at their heart, So that kind of thing interests me enough to explore it a little bit, So yeah, I might at some point give that a go.
Even though your police advisor literally controlled the area that you lived in, so you could have a better advice for procedural and
yeah, well,
he's doing
it now. He's occupying that market now, isn't he? So
he is, yeah.
There's no room for the likes of me.
He's doing it quite well as well, very well.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, there's loads to write about, but I don't want to do another procedural. I've got to, there's only so many procedures you can think of before you start churning out the same old thing, I think. And a good book is still a good book, but I only really want to write Jimmy Bliss to the point where I'm happy writing Jimmy Bliss. At the moment, I think he's getting stale and repeating himself. Then he'll go. It might be a brick on the head. It might be just walking off into the sunset. Who knows?
I'd love to write a cozy book. I just don't think I could. When I start writing, people die really horribly. I can't stop that.
Well,
I don't-
they can do in a cozy book. You just can't describe it.
Yeah, well, I suppose I could write it and then just delete it and then just kind of move on. Because
I just don't. You know, it's not a genre I have an interest in. I don't read it. You know, I've read a couple and decided that it's not for me. So I certainly wouldn't want to write it. Nothing against the people who do. It just doesn't interest me, and I'm not a Vogue writer. You know, I don't. You know, domestic kitchen sink dramas, all that kind of stuff. It's not for me, you know. So I'm not going to write one just to write one. I've got to be interested and fully invested in whatever I'm doing, and I can't fake it, you know. So
yeah, you don't need to be anyway because everyone loves what you write anyway. So
yeah, I mean, I really would. Well,
right.
you know, not everybody likes it, but you know, there's enough people around who do seem to enjoy them. You know, I like being on the edge in terms of, you know, I don't write anything really grisly other than the first chapter of Slow Slicing, probably. But the topic is grisly enough. You know, I tend to veer away from the sort of blood and guts. That's not to say I won't do it, you know, because, you know, I mean, I loved writing Slow Slicing because it could, you know, that was extremely visceral. And that got a little bit out of my system, you know, my need to write about that kind of stuff. Because I do like, you know, psychos. I think they're a good bunch of people, you know, I'd like to go for a drink with a few.
Wait till you read my book as well.
All right, okay.
Yeah. Just, it was fun. I really enjoyed it. I was quite worried how much I enjoyed it, actually.
Yeah, you can ask yourself some of those kind of questions, you know, sort of what does this say about me? But the difference is you're writing about it and not doing it. So
at least I can't because it's illegal.
yeah, damn that murder.
I know, fucking laws and stuff. Honestly, it's very unfair.
Yeah, it's not right.
No, man, ruining all our fun.
Yeah, I think I don't think you need to be a psycho these days. There's too many people out there who just take murder as
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I see psychos on a daily basis walking through Luton.
Well, you would in Luton, wouldn't you?
We had one this morning. I know it's completely random, off topic, but we opened at 7, and there was a guy that walked past, absolutely shouting his head off. God knows what on earth about. And another guy walks past the other way, going, "They shouldn't open the doors this early. They need security. If I was shouting my head off like that, I'd be arrested." And then he just walked off, and me and my friend were just like, "Okay." And then the guy that was shouting his head off came back again, and then he went back again. We're both just like, and the people that were walking through the mall were like, "It's too early for this." So what earth?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, where I live in Peterborough was like that. I mean, you know, city centres, you know, they just are. I mean, there's all kinds of nut jobs walking the streets. Admittedly, down here there aren't that many. In fact, I haven't met one yet. I mean, that's not to say there's no crime or vandalism, but yeah, I haven't encountered any nut jobs in the past year, so that's a pleasant change, I have to say.
Yeah. Could we be really cool and mention the differing fortunes of our football teams, or is that mean?
Well, no, because at least mine is still in the Premiership, so you know.
Yeah, but we're very close to joining you.
Yeah, but you know what? Being close isn't there, is it? So
we're
wind your neck in, because it hasn't happened yet.
But you're not at the top like you used to be.
No, well, that's because they're
shit.
I won't say it. That's because they're shy at the moment, you know. That's because we lost the best owner in football.
Whereas we're just going up and up.
Now we've got a bloke who thinks he's playing the FIFA game online. Oh, he looks a good player. I saw a 5-minute clip of him on YouTube. I'll buy him.
Yeah. Next season, you could be coming to the Kenny. going over people's back gardens to get to the
No, we're
ratings.
not getting relegated.
Sadly, unfortunately, we're really shit at playoffs, so we will still be in the championship next season.
Well, you know what? I've been a Chelsea supporter for many years, so I've been there where you are. I've been in that division. I remember all too well having to get a win in the last game of the season, not to go into the next division. So we've come that close. So yeah, and I followed my club more than physically, you know. So yeah, better to be that than one of these, you know, dodgy supporters who supports a club 200 miles away.
Yeah, well, you're not in London anymore anyway. I suppose if you were as a
Yeah, but
child.
I was as a child, so it still counts. You don't change to where you move.
Yeah, I think Luton are doing all right, you know, if you ever fancied a change.
I don't.
Could still be playing us next season, you never know. 3 games.
Could be. Well, I wish them well.
Yeah, me too, but
because we will need those 6 points next season.
you bastard. Yeah. At least it's going to take 10 million to get our stadium up to Premier League level if we do. No one's seen Luton. There isn't 10 million. I don't think there's 1 million. That'd be fine.
I'm sure they will.
Yeah, we'll see. We've got Sunderland and both games we drew, so I'm not really sure how that's going to go, actually. We haven't really got an indication of how we're going to do. Because, yeah, we drew both our games, so who knows? Find out on Saturday and Tuesday.
Well, good luck.
Thanks. It's out of my control. I'll be at work. No, I'll be in Bristol, actually.
I think it's always been out of your control, no matter where you are.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I just watch. Yeah.
Oh, you're not playing then?
Fuck no. That's effort, man.
Oh,
that
right.
involves
Okay.
that involves moving quicker than walking. And
I thought you might be getting, you know, called up to the squad.
They're not that bad yet. They're not that desperate. When they're in a non-league, maybe, but nah, I think they're doing all right without me. I just shout from the sidelines. Although tickets are sold out, so yeah, not this time.
Well, I hope they do very well.
Yeah, I'll be messaging you, going, "Ha, we are going to be playing you."
Why, ha? It don't matter. You know, I don't mind. They're not. You know, there are some clubs that bother me when they're successful. I won't name them, like every other London club, for example. But no, most other clubs don't bother me.
Well, we finished way above Watford, and they didn't even get playoffs. So that's all we care about, frankly. Even if we don't go up, we can laugh at Watford, so that's fine. That's all we need. We're quite happy. If they kept hold of a manager for longer than a couple of weeks, that would probably help them. But anyway, books. This is what we were here to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Go on then.
But I had to get that in because it just amuses me because I'm a child. And I like to take the piss out of you, considering you were rubbing in about how much time you have because you're retired.
No, I wasn't saying that at all. I was just, I just mentioned the fact that when you said, you did all these hours, I just reminded you that I was there once. I did all those hours. I used to work for a living.
Yeah.
Now I still work for a living.
What was it we started off saying? Oh, yeah, I haven't done anything for 2 months. Okay, yeah.
A month.
I'm sure you said 2.
No.
You haven't been in the office for 2 months.
No, it's still a month. See, you don't even remember an hour ago.
No, I don't. I don't remember 10 minutes ago. I've been to work this morning. I've been up since 4:30.
Well, yeah, I can't beat that. So I've got nothing to say on that. I wasn't up at that time, that's for sure.
Should be illegal. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right. So, Bliss, you've mentioned a few times that you have plans for the next 2. So tell us.
Yeah. Plans are great things. Given the time, they'll definitely happen. So as anyone who's read my books, the Bliss books, especially the more recent ones, everybody knows that and it's no spoiler that Jimmy is coming up to compulsory retirement. And anyone who knows Jimmy knows that he wants to carry on in some way, shape, or form. So, over the past year, I've been thinking loads of different ways. And during a conversation with the person we mentioned earlier, Graham Bartlett, that is, for anyone who doesn't know who we're talking about, as my police advisor, he mentioned a couple of things, and I asked a couple of questions, and it seemed that there was it kind of lit something in my head about the way I might want this to go. So, the next book is called What Dies Inside Us. And I know what it's going to be. I've started writing it. I don't plan books necessarily or plot them very well, but I know what it's going to be about. I know the two main threads running through the story. Jimmy Bliss will retire at the end of this book. And so, there's an element there that I need. It's a pivotal book. So it's one I'm determined to get absolutely right in different ways, because, as a result of him retiring, there has to be a reshuffle in the team and stuff like that. So there's different elements to take on board for this book. But of course, he's not giving up entirely. So, and in fact, he's not giving up in many ways, because in the following book, which at the moment is called Something More to Say, he is still working at the same police station in the same city with the same team, because he's now become, in that book, he will become a civilian SIO. I better say what that is. That's a senior investigating officer. So at the moment, obviously, any major crime is run by an SIO anyway. More murder is run by SIOs. And nominally speaking, Jimmy does the job that his boss really does. DCI Warburton is currently usually the SIO, but pretty much Jimmy runs the case and she just logs it. But he will become a civilian doing that job. And what actually surprised me was that there are very few restrictions. In fact, pretty much the only restriction is he will no longer have his warrant card. He still directs that team. He still directs the actions, and they pretty much have to sort of follow his lead. But most SIOs are, behind a desk, sort of leading the operation. Whereas Jimmy, in Jimmy's nature, he won't be behind a desk very much. But, he will still be running cases, and he will still be running them with the same team. The major difference is that he has another job, and that is working with a small group of ex-detectives working unsolved cold cases. So that's going to be the significant change. I mean, yes, he won't have a warrant card, but he'll still be able to work with the same characters, which I was desperate to find a way for him to stay and to still work with the same characters. There'll be a bit of a shuffle, but, by and large, he'll be with the same team. But yeah, the other part of it sort of really intrigued me, getting him into cold cases, because very often he drifts into looking at old cases, even in his current investigations. And I've always enjoyed writing those parts. So it made sense. These units do exist. So there's every part of it is feasible. And I made sure of that with Graham, that it was all feasible, that it could be done. I'm very, very happy about that direction, because, for a while I was really worried about how I could continue. I thought of staging the book so that everyone was a month after the last one, so that the books, but then you find you've only advanced 6 months in sort of 6 years kind of thing of writing. So that didn't work well in my head. But I was desperate for a way to keep going as long as I still wanted to write Jimmy Bliss books. And so when I wrote the last one, The Lightning Rod, I kind of started leaning in towards this direction anyway, leaving a few doors open, possibly going to the National Crime Agency. But I disregarded that one because he can still work with them as part of his new job anyway. And I just thought, yeah, working cold cases, working with his old team, it opens up, kind of makes it fresh again for me. And it gave me, you know, the inspiration for these two books, the last and the beginning of the next part of his career. So he will have left the police, essentially. He will no longer be a police officer, but he's still working with the police as a civilian. And like I say, that's the plan. And I had intended, all things being equal, to have What Dies Inside Us out later this year. But as I mentioned earlier, you know, because I'm not writing at the moment, so I doubt that's going to happen. I can't see it happening now. You know, and I can't honestly say when it will be out. All I can say is that, you know, once I feel up to coming in here and working again properly and full time, then yeah, that will be the next thing I do.
But you have such a supportive group of readers anyway that they'll wait however long it takes, won't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, hopefully they will, and hopefully they'll be pleased to see him back. I don't usually go very long between Bliss books, but I strongly suspect this will be the longest period. You know, but I've got the Predators out, you know, in less than a week, so that's a book, and it's in a series that I'm, you know, quietly very fond of. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't do for me as a writer what the Jimmy Bliss series does for me as a writer, you know, and I enjoy sharing those books with other people. But you've got to get them right every time. And so you do get that added bit of, there's added pressure because of the added expectation. People naturally, you know, if they're in your corner, they want to read, you know, another good book. And so the pressure's on you to deliver something equally good, if not better. You can't always get better, but hopefully you achieve a standard and you can stay at that standard. And every now and then, you know, hopefully one book pops its head up and says, you know, this is really good. But you can never tell. You know, you can have all the ideas in the world, until it's written, you really can't tell. And I'm the worst judge of my books ever.
Yes, you are. You're a nightmare.
So
I want to shake you.
Yeah, I know. I simply can't tell with my books whether they're any good or not. So, you know, I rely on other people to feed back to me, you know.
And then you still don't believe us. And then reviews start coming in and you still don't believe us. And then eventually you're like, maybe it's all right.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of months down the line, I'll probably think, yeah, that was not too bad. You know, but I think it's a case of I have to detach myself from it. And while I'm writing it, while I'm editing it, and until it's published and out there, I'm very much attached. And I have to detach myself from it and reflect on it before I can kind of judge its worth, really. I mean, I don't read them, as you know, unless it's for a specific reason. And I've only ever read two. And only one of those was partial. So I've only ever really read The Huntsman. And that was prior to writing this one. So, yeah, I'm not a good judge of them, but especially leading up to pub. I mean, all writers are nervous about publishing, or at least I hope they are, because you should never become complacent. The worst thing for me now is to think I've got it right, because then I'm going to seriously doubt myself. If I think I've got it right, there's got to be something wrong with it, you know. So, you know,
no, all of you are a nightmare. All of you, every single one, are an absolute pain in the arse. You're so insecure. You're so amazing, and it's very frustrating. I just want to slap you around the face, but you know, you're spread across the country.
Well,
so
I've met you a couple of times now, and you haven't slapped me around the face yet.
No, I know. Well, the first time I was just too excited. You just got a hug. which I did warn you in advance that you were going to get.
And then the second time it was ho hum, and blimey, there's better writers than you here, mate. So
it wasn't. You still got just as massive a hug, actually.
Yeah, that was only because you were late and you were relieved.
I was. Yeah, right. To rub it in.
No, I mean, you'll find out for yourself as you go through that it doesn't get easier. It gets easier. Writing doesn't really get easier. You improve, and so you feel a bit better about those improvements. But it doesn't get easier. It certainly hasn't for me. And you need to be in the right headspace too to even think about it. I openly admit I've not enjoyed this process of releasing this book. I like the book. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a good follow-up to The Huntsman. In many ways, I think it's probably a better and more complex story. But by the same token, I haven't found it an enjoyable process. But that's mainly because of other circumstances. So yeah, I within a few weeks' time, hopefully I'll be over this stage, and I really can't wait to get cracking again. I just want to crack on with it now. I've been out the saddle for this is too long for me, way too long. It's the longest I've not been writing properly in the last 6 years. So I don't want it to go on.
I can, gather the Blissets and, get them to all message you frequently if it helps.
I know that people are in my corner, and I know that people want to read them. So I'm not despondent about that at all. The only way I'm despondent is that I just can't at the moment. I can't for various reasons. I can't attach myself to a new book, especially one as pivotal as this next one, unless I'm 100% focused, and I haven't got that focus at the moment. And there's nothing that will give it to me other than sort of some personal good news. So it's just time, really.
Yeah, I do think a lot of the time, especially when I read around the book groups, that people forget that authors are humans behind everything else. They're still humans with lives, with families, with feelings, emotions and stuff. And the way that they talk is like, yeah, but there's a person behind that, and they've still got a life outside of writing these books. So, rein yourself in because you're an asshole.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I understand it. I mean, it is easy to forget that people doing this job have lives, and they have people around them, and they have things to overcome just like everybody else does, and it's no better and it's no worse, but you just have to do that. And I'm lucky that I don't, I know it came up earlier and we joked about it. I'm lucky that I don't have a job to go to at the moment, that I can kind of detach myself. But I feel genuine frustration at the fact that I can't focus properly at the moment, because I really want to get cracking on this next book. But at the same time, I've got to be realistic, and I don't want to spend months sitting here writing utter shite, because I'm not focused. I want to be focused. I can come back and edit. Yeah, that's fine. But I don't want a year of editing because I've written 6 months worth of crap. So I want to be fully focused in myself and just sort of sit down and shut the outside world out. And at the moment, that's probably my biggest problem, is that I can't shut out other things. So, it'll come, but it's just not there yet. But
yes, sorry.
No, I was just going to say I'm determined to write them, and I've even got the two covers done for the 2 new books. So they're having paid out for them. That's another reason to sort of get in, So yeah, it's that just seeing them kind of gives me the focus, part of the focus that I need. That those two books are there to write, and every so often the characters pop into my head, and I think of something new, another little twist, and something else I need to write. So that all helps. And as I say, it's nothing that other people don't go through. And with the best will in the world, it's something. It's a postponement rather than a cancellation.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about titles. How easily and how do you come up with titles for your books?
In 100 different ways, probably. What I've done for the last, even the last one came in The Lightning Rod. Just came to me as a fitting description of the bad guy. It didn't come from anything. I thought of the job that he was doing, and I thought of an appropriate equivalent, in the world. And I felt that he was a human lightning rod in many ways. Other things, and the two new titles for the Bliss books have come from quotations or song lyrics. So What Dies Inside has come from a poem. And I really much like that. And Something More to Say was originally the title for this new book. But when I realized that actually part of Jimmy's career, his career with the police force is coming to an end, but then he's doing something else with the police, it felt like that was a good title for the follow-up book, because he has got something more to say as a person and as an individual. And that comes from a Pink Floyd lyric. So yeah, titles come in mysterious ways to me. 15 Coffins came as a title. That sprang into my head one day. 15 Coffins. I wrote it down. And it wasn't until about, I don't know, probably 9 months later, I thought, yeah, what can I write a book about that's called 15 Coffins? And that's how that came around. Bow to the Bone was obviously a song. So yeah, sometimes I like it to kind of describe what's in the book. Like the autumn tree there's a thread of the autumn in that book. There is an autumn, there's a physical autumn tree. But there's also a thread of the autumn. It takes place in the autumn. It's the autumn of Jimmy Bliss's career. There's a kind of, sometimes that happens. The Death of Justice was, I felt, right for that because it was how Bliss was feeling at the time, and it's something he says, about it being, he didn't believe in justice anymore. He felt that it was the death of justice. So it sometimes comes from something said or something I feel, or from an inspirational quote. If I happen to read or hear a lyric, that might spur me on to give me a title. I wish I could say the same for the Predators. But once I, the first book was called The Huntsman, I decided that all the books would be called The Something, one word, because I haven't done that in any of my books before. And when I was thinking about it and sort of had the story down in my head, I thought, well, it's the perfect title. It must have been used before. But when I searched through Amazon, it hadn't. Mm-hmm. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to have that then. So that was that. That was where the Predators came from, because mm-hmm. it suited the story perfectly,
Yeah, that hasn't helped me come up with a better title for my book. Which is very much why I asked the question.
Well, sometimes you see a book visually, and so you can almost think of the perfect cover, and sometimes thinking of the perfect cover can give you the title, or was thinking of the subject matter, and thinking about different aspects of, I mean, I had a I'm going to have a quick look in the Predators for a moment, because I looked up the thing about Predators, and so I've got a little quoting here at the beginning of the book about predators. And I looked through there and I thought, I mean, just by looking at quotes about the subject matter of your story, sometimes you'll find a word or a collection of words that come together that you think suddenly snap into your head. Almost certainly it'll be something that just pops into your head when you're least thinking about it. But yeah, I mean, titles are probably not as crucial as covers, but they're close to it, I think. The three things, your cover, your title, and your blurb, are the first things that people see. So they're critical to get right.
Yes, and no pressure then, thanks. That helps.
Absolutely. If I can make it worse at all for you, just ask.
Don't mention how much I hate you.
If I can not help you in any way, I will.
I know. And laugh in the process, you bastard.
Yeah, I do like to hinder where I can.
And yet I'm having you back at my Brighton event in October.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Will readers be able to meet you anywhere else over the summer?
They will not. I'm not going anywhere. Again, for pretty much the reasons that are keeping me from writing, I'm not attending anything. I'm not doing an event myself, and I'm not attending any events. I'm wiping myself off the map for that for the foreseeable future. But I will. I will be at the Brighton Bash, and I'm really looking forward to that because, there's a lot of good people on there, most of whom I wouldn't have met. Looking forward to seeing Malcolm again. Met him a couple of times, but I haven't met Wes. And I won't mention his name because he's not on the list yet, but a certain person you mentioned earlier, he and I have exchanged quite a few messages in the last few months. So I'm looking forward to meeting him as well. He's I read his last book and I was chatting to him about that.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully I'm going to see and get a final decision at the weekend about that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it depends whether he's there on the same day as me or not, but it'd be good to meet up with him. I mean, it's always nice to meet other writers as well as obviously readers and bloggers. But it's, the mix is usually very good, and it was at the last one. It was a good mix.
Yeah, I forget that because I know everybody. Not everybody knows everybody. So to me, it's like I just know all these people. I know.
There were loads I'd not met, and I hate to say it, but I'd never heard of. But that's simply because they write in a genre that, although, some people, the ones who write kind of domestic noir kind of stuff. There was a panel, all female panel you had. And they just don't write books that I read. It's not, they're very well known outside of my sphere, but I don't happen to read that subgenre of crime. So that's why I hadn't heard of them. But it's there's a lot of good people going, so it's should be a cracking event.
I hope so. Yeah. I've created it now. Just Malcolm did it.
Yeah, you've created a monster.
I really have. Yeah. I know. I've already done one and gone from one day to two. So I seem to have accidentally created a festival. So then next year, does that mean that it will be like 3 days over the weekend?
Well, it's everything had to start somewhere. And you've garnered more authors this time around, and some very well-respected, well-known authors. Not to say you didn't have any last time, but more widespread this time. So I think there's a good mix, and I think that's what a lot of events don't have. I think a lot of events rely very heavily on the mainstream big names. And
yeah. And I'd never, that's something that I'd stick to my guns, is always having a mix. I'd never want to be elitist for the self, the traditionally published and stuff, because I mean, I'm friends with so many of these authors and they need a voice as well. So yeah, that's something that I'd never.
Well, I did notice, although I'm not going, I did notice that the Bristol one has got a panel of indies, and that's a thing in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. I hope Harrogate goes that way at some point. Not for me, because I doubt I'll ever go to Harrogate again. But I think it's something to be recognised.
Well, Bloody Scotland as well they have a New Voices thing. So, and I think 20 odd debut authors get to read out from their book before each panel. Yeah. And then they get to sit with the authors afterwards and sign their books as well. And I think that's awesome, so it is very slowly starting to
Well,
change.
It is getting there. I mean, the Crime Writers Association, have, not completely recently, but only relatively recently allowed indies in. And, so there's a lot changing because I think it has to. And, it's one of those things. There's a hell of a lot of good writers out there. So I'm very much hoping that things will change along that route.
So, yeah, me too. Because obviously I read shed loads, and I read some incredible books, and it's so frustrating that they're not getting that recognition. But yeah, hopefully
I've just been delivered a cuppa.
Oh.
By the maid.
I hope she slaps you around the head when you're finished.
Oh, she will.
Good, that's fine. As long as you're kept in line, that's fine.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have many more questions for you anyway, unless there's anything obvious that I've missed that you want to mention.
No, I think we've rambled a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's been an enjoyable ramble. But if people want to skip through the video through the football part, they can. But yeah, I mean, I've conscious of the fact I've probably laboured a bit too much about why I'm not writing. There's nothing dramatically wrong, So it's I just have a few issues to deal with. So that's why I'm not working. It's nothing horrendous. So
that's good. Yeah.
I don't want anyone sort of thinking, I'm going to keel over in 5 minutes. Unless, of course, I happen to have a Connery, and then, we're done.
Well, if you could do that after October, that'd be grand, thanks, because otherwise that'd really ruin my plans.
Yeah, you know what? The more I talk about it, more I talk about things like this with my wife and daughter, the more they think about how it's going to affect them rather than me.
Yeah. Well, you'll be gone. It won't matter to you. So, they can only think about how it affects them.
Yeah, true. I mean, it's how I think about things, actually. I don't care. I do want a Viking funeral, but they've agreed not to do that. The most they'll do is put my ashes in a shoebox and put it in the fish pond.
Okay.
That's the closest I'm getting to my Viking funeral. Yeah.
Well, there's compromise. That's good.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a fair compromise, but I want, as long as one of them shoots a flaming arrow into it, then we'll be okay. But no, I think it's been good to chat with you again, because I've had to pull out the last two that we arranged.
You have.
So I was determined to sort of make this one, and it's been pleasurable speaking to you again. And I know I'll see you later in the year, and obviously we'll chat a lot of times before that. And
you make it sound like I'm some bloody obsessive stalker.
No, we chat about stuff, and of course you got your own writing now, which you're going to let me have a look at. So we'll have that to talk about as well. So
yeah, and then you can worry about how scary I am when I kill my character.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I want to say about the new book is that I might have mentioned it before, but I'm not doing a blog tour this time. I've got bloggers reading it and doing reviews. Some have released them, some are releasing them next week. So I'll be sharing those around. But I'm not doing an official tour this time around, because I wasn't at all certain about meeting deadlines for people, so I didn't want to make it formal. Okay.
So
But
just hold
thank you
your
for today.
hold your book up again, so everyone can see what they're going to go by.
Yeah, it's a little bit slightly longer than the last one. I think there's certainly some humorous parts in it. The opening to chapter 2, I've been told, is disgusting. But, yeah. So yeah, I wish I could enjoy it a bit more, because I actually, it's an enjoyable book. I think, I hope people will sort of take it for what it is. Yeah, hopefully the response will sort of steer me a bit more towards thinking about a third. But as I say, at the moment, I'm thinking nothing other than Jimmy.
That's fine by me. But obviously on Monday I will share its release, and I will reshare my review,
Thank you.
which was a shiny 5-star review. So
thank you. Yeah, they're always nice to get. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it deserves it. So.
And then I'll wait. Come Monday or Tuesday, there'll be the drive-by 1-star troll coming on there to give it their 1 star, even though they've not read it.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, these people are out there.
Are you fanning yourself? Is there a dog in the room?
There's a dog. Trixie, you gonna come say hello with my sock, little cow?
Yeah, I don't say hello to dogs.
Oh, she's a look how cute she is. Look.
Oh yeah, really nice ears. Very nice. Oh, that's a really cracking. Oh, blimey. Yeah. Is that a carrot?
Yeah, a carrot and my fucking sock. My socks are all over the house and garden. I've given up having pairs. I just grab 2 now.
Well, we don't have a dog. We don't have any animals. But I'm not, I like dogs. Haven't had one since I was a kid. But obviously I kind of, I get my dog fix now with Bliss. So yeah.
You can have this one if you want. It's a pain in the butt.
No, you're all right, thanks.
Okay, fine. Anyway. I can't see.